Hi, I'm Hannah and welcome to FinextraTV. With me now to discuss the upcoming Sustainable Finance.Live event in November is, of course, Richard Pearce from Responsible Risk. Good to see you again, Richard.
Good to see you. How are you?
Very well, thank you, and very excited to be talking about the next event in the series, Sustainable Finance.Live in November. And that's the purpose of this interview. We want to talk a bit about what we can expect from the event. That's from the content, the format, the environment you're creating for attendees. But first, I think it's worth you bringing us up to date. What's been the progress so far?
Well, if you think over the last couple of years, mainly through the pandemic, what we've done is a series of workshops, and those workshops have really been focusing on how can we actually solve some of the big problem statements that are stopping capital being allocated to projects which are actually going to resolve things like climate change, social and governance issues. And we've looked at a range of topics, as you'll remember, around the risk, the function of risk, natural capital, and so forth. So we've done this body of work, these workshops involving people from our advisory board like London Stock Exchange, Microsoft, World Wildlife Fund, etc. And that has given us this deep analysis from business decision makers about what the needs are, what the issues are, what the process problems are, and what the technical solutions might be. So that's given, if you like, the body of work that we've been looking for that's helped us set ourselves up for this next event.
And they've been a great success, haven't they? But tell us, how is the next event in the series going to be different from the last 2 years' worth of workshops?
Yeah, well, the big difference is we can do it in person, which is massively helpful. So we're looking forward to doing that in London. We're going to keep it hybrid as well, so people can dial in from around the world that have been involved. But the real big difference, I think, is we want to move it on from talking about the problem statements and identifying perhaps some of the solutions, but trying to move that into, if you will, actual code and companies that we hope are going to sort of mushroom up and actually be delivering some of the things that we've spoken about. So very action oriented, and we'll do that through three things, which is the conference, which will really allow us all, particularly business people, to again bring ourselves up to speed on the problems and solutions. An unconference, which will give us a place to sort of, if you like, go a bit off piste on a few topics. And then a hackathon. So that is the place where we'll bring, if you will, the coders and the business idea decision makers together to come up with the solution that we can perhaps invest in one day.
Sure, and we're going to talk a bit more about the hackathon later on, but how are you going to sort of weave in the themes and work around the themes at a conference level then?
Yeah, so we've looked at the priority solutions from all the workshops that we did, and still persistent is the issue of data, asynchronous data. Where does it come from? How can we trust it? Is it greenwashing or not? So we're really going to drill in on that one. We're going to look at what do you do with the data once you've got it. Usually it goes into the risk function, who then decide whether the risk is low enough or high enough to actually invest. So we're looking at that forward-looking dynamic data. And then we're looking at the financial instruments, be it from debt instruments all the way through to tokenization and DeFi, about how do I actually then, if you like, spend the money.
Sure, some exciting topics of discussion there, and big ones and complex questions to be answered too, which brings me to the format of the event and the type of environment you're going to be creating so people can answer those questions. You're going to be running an unconference, so explain to us what that entails.
Yeah, so an unconference is not necessarily familiar to everybody, but it's essentially a space that we will make available at the conference obviously being relatively structured and panels and speakers, and you can see the agenda. Unconference being a space which we will provide some facilitation for people to go into and say, hey, at 10 o'clock, I want to talk about something they're not talking about here. I've got good brains in the room. I want to convene a bit of a group and let's get down around a whiteboard to talk about something. So we don't want to assume we know, everything, but we want to provide a safe space for people to be able to come in and say, do you know what, there's too much talk here about tech or data or whatever. I want to talk about policy. And
Sure.
we're not formally doing that. Informally, they could do it at the unconference.
It's going to help people branch out and, like you say, move that conversation forward. So you've already mentioned the hackathon. So tell us what that entails, especially for those that might have some preconceptions about what that might involve.
Well, I think immediately people say, oh, that's not for me. That's just for the sort of hard coders. No, absolutely not. You know, it's one of those really exciting things to get involved with because you're being given a challenge, right? You're not sitting back in your chair and just watching some PowerPoints, you know, and you're not just talking. You're getting around the idea and say, what's the project we want to do? What do we want to focus on? If we were doing the press release, you know, of our new business being launched, what would it be? What team do we need of people? Some business people, some technical people, etc. What are we going to focus on? What's the, you know, within the three things I've described? And then, okay, we don't have the ability here necessarily to code everything. We might want to focus on you know, the project plan, you know, the Cranfield business model. We might want to focus on a clickable demo, something kind of PowerPoint oriented. But we do want the sort of tech firms there as well. And to that regard, we're providing a fantastic suite of mentors, technology, APIs, data sets, and the FCA Sandbox's platform provider, which is Naya One, who are going to be our key platform for people to bring data, use data, and actually code projects should they want to. So we've got the whole spectrum.
That's right, because there might be those, they might feel they're not sort of hackathon qualified or don't know how to get involved. So what's your message to them then? What sort of tools and relationships?
Yeah, well, just listen, come and, you know, wherever you are, you know, with any state of idea, and, you know, you'll be welcomed. You'll find you a team. One of the great things about this one, some of the challenges of hackathons is that people turn up with a lot of tech skills, don't know what the business problem is. Right. The beauty of this is, as I've described, you can go back to the workshops, it's all recorded, you've got the visual records that we've created, you can look back at the areas that we're focusing on, again, which is, you know, this data, this risk, and the financial instruments. You can wind through all of the problem statements, so really get a rich sense of the business context. Then you can work with the mentors if you don't know enough about the tech, and you've got access to the data, so you can really experiment and iterate. And you know that is just a wonderful set of ingredients if you want to make an impact in this space.
No, it's really exciting, and I want to touch on this issue, which you've touched on already, the lack of data for innovations that are required for regulators and financial services industry. That's a big one that we've discussed in the past. How are we going to provide excellent data for the hackers involved?
Well, as I say, first of all, working with Naya One, that's fantastic, right? So they are providing the FCA Financial Conduct Authority Sandbox, which is a space for people to experiment in the eyes of the regulator. So they've built up this platform which has got a lot of rich data sets in it already, and you can go onto Naya One and you can start to explore that. They also, we're working, and fingers crossed on the day we'll be able to announce it, but OS Climate, which, you know, we've spoken about before, providing an open source marketplace of data from many different sources in the sustainability world that can be used by the financial services community. They'll hopefully be feeding their data into the sandbox as well. So we are going to have just a fantastic array of data here for people to play with.
Brilliant. And coming back to the themes, we've looked at the themes at a conference level. So what about at a hackathon level?
Yeah, so I think, you know, we do want to scope it in because, you know, that's where we've been going with the conference. So as I say, you know, the first one is the data. Now, you could sort of say, well, you know, this has been done to death, but there is still a lot of questions about, you know, am I taking ESG reporting data? Am I looking at social feeds? Am I looking at data coming through the supply chain? Is it just carbon data, or is it social data, diversity, inclusion? There's still a lot of questions out there. So we'll talk about taking asynchronous data and bringing that together in a way that it can be used by the financial services industry. The risk side of the equation is still, I think, you know, probably very unexplored. You know, we've spoken before about forward-looking dynamic data as opposed to historical static data. Right. And what's happening in the world of risk modelling to be able to take in that data, process it, and come up with a risk price, which is actually meaning these young businesses are going to get a reasonable, you know, return on their investment of effort. So that's a whole big question that I'll be fascinated to see what people come up with
Sure, yeah.
there. I mean, I don't know the answers. And then the final one, which is around this financial instruments, we've looked at, we're going to talk about green bonds, sustainability-linked bonds, which we've discussed before, and obviously that's a big part of what's pumping the money into the sustainability industry. But you'll also remember we wanted to kind of hedge our bets, and we looked at DeFi and tokenization, particularly rewilding token, which we did in one of our other workshops. And we're going to have the guys there that have got a long way since we first spoke about that project. So we'll be able to see the yin and the yang of what's going on in financial instruments as well.
Sure, there's a lot going on, a lot to sink your teeth into, and you've painted a good picture of what we can expect. But I'm already looking ahead. What's going to happen after the hackathon?
So what I'm doing now is I want to really sort of see, if you like, that fintech model that we've seen over the last 10 years come through. So, you know, we went through some regulation, then we had some ideas, and we saw some accelerators and hackathons. Then we went into incubation and acceleration, and then obviously, you know, VC funding, etc. And we've ended up with our Monzos, Revoluts, and Starlings. So I want to see that path for this work. And so at the moment, I'm working with, you know, anybody that's out there, you know, VCs, accelerators, innovators, funds, etc., that wants to, you know, get around this kind of catalyst activity. Then that's where we want to take these firms into that path.
Well, Richard, can't wait. But just for a bit more clarity, can you take us through the order of events?
Yeah. So the first big thing to think about is there's a one-day in-person event. That's on November the 29th in London. We will be filming the main conference, not the hackathon for streaming. So turn up on that day, you get the conference, you get the unconference, and you get the hackathon kickoff all in the same day. Why is that important? Because you can meet the business people, the technical people, and really sort of gel your team and what it is you want to focus on. We then close the conference on the 29th. The virtual hackathon continues using the platform I've described over the next few days, so that on December the 2nd, when the submissions are all in, we will judge and we will award our winner on December the 2nd.
Brilliant. Can't wait. Richard, thank you very much. And people can go find out more about the event on the Finextra site and Responsible Risk website. But till then, Richard, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.